The James Gilliard Show on Choice FM.
Happy Monday, everyone. Today is Monday, May 20th in the year of our Lord 2024. I'm James Gilliard, and this is the James Gilliard Show. I'm excited that you are joining me today right here live on Choice FM. I love choicefm.com and 92.1 FM on the dial. It's the People Station. I'm excited, and I want to just shout out everybody today except the people who tell a lie like it's the truth. That's where I'm going to start today. So I'm going to put a pin in that for a hot minute. But this is the James Gilliard Show, and this is where we talk politics, sports, culture, the news, religion, all the things that people say we shouldn't talk about because they're controversial. But I'm learning, and you should learn, those are the things that make our lives better. So I want us to be informed, and I want to jump in today and begin about folk who tell a lie like it's the truth. It's mind-boggling to me, the kind of fake news that's out there. And so, listen, real talk here. I surf the dial when I'm driving, right? And I surf on Sirius and I surf on FM stations all over the place, and I bounce around. And sometimes it's hard for me to listen to certain commentary, but I will because I want to know what crazy folk are thinking. And so I go from left to right to middle and all over the place surfing. I'm listening to this conservative talk show. And this is what they do. They get to talking loud, right? And then they start acting, they get a tone of aggression in their voice because they're trying to intimidate you. But yet they sound so convincing, like they're not stuttering over a word. Watch out for people like this. And then we get dragged into, so he gets to talking about Obama versus Trump. And this is what he says. He says, you do realize that under Obama was the highest increase to our federal debt in the history of America. And when I tell you he didn't stutter, and I'm listening to him, and this is immediately what I thought. And I'm gonna be honest, when he said it, I didn't have the data, but I knew I was gonna go get the data because it was the way he said it. I was like, he's lying. I know he is lying. People, listen to me. Don't get all caught up in the emotions of what people are saying to you. Let people check the data. Fact proof some stuff. It's no different than going to church. People talking about what's in the Bible and half of what they talking about in the Bible, not in the Bible. Or they give you some interpretation that's not correct. We have to fact check stuff. So he blurts out this thing, all argumentative, all angry, all convincing, and how Democrats, have destroyed the economy and don't know how to manage money. And he's just going on and on. Now, let me be really clear. I think all of the federal government is wrong. Like I've always said, we need to run our federal government and our state government and our local governments like we do our homes. Like I don't get to run up, hundreds of dollars, trillions of dollars, thousands of dollars, millions of dollars in debt and then don't ever have to pay anybody. I don't get to do that. You don't get to do that in your house. Like I don't get to go out to eat at a restaurant and then not pay the tab and say the people that's going to sit at this table next is going to pay the tab. Because that's what we do to our children, right? When we run up all these trillions of dollars in debt, all we're doing is saying, I'm eating at the table, but I'm going to wait for my child to show up. They can pay for it. Or somebody else's child pay for it. So let me be very clear. I'm not in agreement about running up the debt. I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican. What I disdain and what I'm calling out are people, particularly these conservative talk show hosts that are so convincing and they are lying. And they're banking on, this is what they're banking on. They're banking on, oh boy, I'm about to make some enemies now. They're banking on people not fact-checking. This is what they're banking on. They're banking on people not thinking. They're banking on people not bringing their brain to the conversation. That's why you do know, by the way, just throwing this in for free is just data that's available. 60% of everyone without a high school diploma, 60% of everyone without a high school diploma, how do you think they vote? They vote Republican. 60% of everyone with a bachelor's degree, how do you think they vote? They vote Democrat. What's the point that I'm making? That oftentimes these talk show hosts, these commentators, particularly on the far right, these conservatives, they are banking that people are not going to think. They're banking that people will not research the data. So here's the problem with what he said. And this is what I want people on my show to be able to do. I want you to be able to think through issues, people. Like, can we bring our brain to the conversation? So let's look at this logically. Trump versus Obama. How many years was Obama in the White House? 8. How many years was Trump in the White House? 4. Now, let me ask you a basic question. If I told you there were 2 people, and both of those people have been shopping, one person has been shopping for 8 years, and one person's been shopping for 4 years, and I were to say to you, of all the people shopping, this person over here spends the most money. But is it a true analogy of what's going on if they've not been in office the same amount of time? So what they don't tell us the whole story. That's what they're banking on. So I have the data. So what I did was I looked at the last 8 presidents. And it just so happens 4 of them are Democratic presidents and 4 of them are Republican presidents. For those of you that's tuning in, I'm James Gilliard. This is the James Gilliard Show. I'm going to be listening and watching all your posts in just a moment. But I'm talking about people that tell a lie like it's the truth. So I looked at the last 8 presidents, and I said, how much did the deficit increase? What was the percent increase of the deficit under their presidency? And so I added up Biden, Obama, Clinton, and Carter. That was the last 4 Democratic presidents. And then the last 4 Republican, Trump, Bush, H.W. Bush, Reagan. And I put them all together, right? And the percent increase of Democrats is 37.6%. So when you combine all of them on average, the debt has increased by 37%. When I combine the Republicans, the debt has increased by 61%. Well, that surely puts a hole in the theory that people that are conservatives are better money managers. But let's go a little bit deeper. It is true that in the 8 years that President Obama was in office, there was an increase of 70% of the national debt. And while Donald Trump was in the presidency, and I just did what conservative talk show hosts do. Did you hear? Did you just catch what I just did? I did something subliminal on purpose. I said President Obama, and then I said Donald Trump. They do that all the time. They'll say President Donald Trump, but then they say Barack Obama or just Obama. Like they won't give him the dignity of his title because they want people thinking less of him, and they want you not thinking of him in a presidential way. So he was in office 8 years. And in those 8 years, there was an increase of 70%. Now, listen to this. Donald Trump was in office 4 years, and in those 4 years, it was an increase of 40%. So when I do my math, it's about 8% a year under Obama, but 10% increase a year under Trump. Let me give you hard data. Under President Obama, the debt increased by this is such a crazy high number. Under Obama, the debt increased by $1.1 trillion a year. Is your head swirling like mine is? I can't even get my head around a number that big. Under Obama, the debt increased by $1.1 trillion per year. Are you ready for the Trump number? I'm going to give it to you whether you're ready or not. You got 1.1, right? A year. Trillions. A year. Under Donald Trump, the deficit increased by $1.9 trillion every year. $1.1 trillion for Obama, 1.9 increase for Donald Trump. And yet here is this conservative talk show host blurting out with anger and venom and conviction that under Barack Obama, we had the highest increase ever to our federal deficit, our federal deficit, without giving all the data. And so here's my point. Whether you are listening to me or another personality on the radio, whether you listen to me or another personality on social media, check the data, okay? Check the data. And so I wanted to start with shouting out everybody except Andrew Wilkow and the Wilkow majority, who seems to not be able to tell the truth. That's right, I called his name out and just insist on, with anger and venom, telling a lie like it's the truth. That's a good word for preachers. If we're going to get up on Sunday morning and tell the truth like it's the truth. And just speak out the truth. But don't open up. And see, you know, part of telling a lie like it's the truth is not giving all the data. Putting out something and not putting it in context. Like the first example that I gave. You can't compare 8 years and 4 years. Those two things don't look alike. Hello, somebody. So be careful. Don't grab all of your news from one outlet, from one source, from one paper. That's what makes us so divided. You know, people who think far right, they're getting all of their stuff from Fox News. Like we have retail establishments, restaurants in our community. Shouting out to everybody in Rocky Mount, Tarboro, Wilson. If I go in your establishment, every time you go in there, you have on Fox News, I can promise you won't get any of James Gilliard's money. Because I know you're so narrow-minded. I could see if, you know what, we're going to do an hour of CNN, then we're going to do an hour of Fox, we're going to do an hour of MSNBC. I can vibe with that. We're going to do an hour of Progress Radio, an hour of Patriot Radio, and an hour of POTUS. Okay, I can get down with that. But we're allowing people to suck us in an emotion because what they're doing is planting a seed of what they think we want to believe. And when we hear it, it then just confirms what we were thinking, and we never realized it was a lie. So shout out to everybody today on the James Gilliard Show, except the folk that know how to tell a lie like it's the truth. All right, let me shift gears with us today. And I'll look at your comments in a minute, but let me shift gears with us. Y'all, I'm not one of those like judgment, condemnation, gossipy. I don't just rock like that. I don't even go like chasing after the news trends and all that, but I know I want to talk about some of it because you care about it. I'm heartbroken. Did y'all see the video that was released with Sean Combs, with P Diddy and Cassie Ventura? I mean, before I even get into that, can I just say to some woman, and it could be a man too, but it's largely women by the percentage. If you are in some situation of domestic violence, you know, some man is beating you, raping you, manipulating you, sis, I want to pray God gives you the courage to get out. I have daughters, you know, and I don't want that for my children. I don't want it, and so my mind was heartbroken over this. First of all, I'm heartbroken that it got released. What was it, 2016? So what's that, 8 years later? You know, here's this woman married, 2 children. Now, depending on the age of her daughters, they have to worry about their mom all over the news with Sean Combs in a hotel in a room, coming down out the room, literally beating her, kicking her, punching her. What? So, you know, no respect for any man that puts hands on a woman. Period. And you know, I was shopping recently, and there was a couple in line behind me. They were I was returning something, and they were too. It was at Lowe's, and she went to help him, and when I tell you, he flat out cursed her out. I was in astonishment because I guess I've been so detached from this, I didn't realize how much of a real thing this is. Calling her all kinds of mother MFers, and I mean, it was just unbelievable. And I thought to myself, man, if he is talking to her like this in public, I can't imagine what in the world. And I felt so helpless. And I'm watching this video, and then, then here comes Diddy with his, I take full responsibility for my actions. Well, first, how you take full responsibility for your actions and you don't even apologize? You don't even call nobody name, right? So, talking about I've gone to rehab. And let me be really clear. I'm not suggesting he may not need to go to rehab. Evidently, something wrong. And so this is not so much about Diddy bashing for me as it is about how do we get the message across to the Cassie Venturas of the world that no career, no advancement, no man, no amount of money, no amount of prestige, no amount of bling or drip or whatever it is that's being offered is worth a man putting his hands on you. And if I have young women, especially, it could be older women. If you're listening to this show, I had no idea talking about domestic violence. I just want to talk about this video, but you can't talk about the video and not talk about domestic violence. And so Diddy posts a video Sunday morning. If you've seen it, he's looking directly into a camera. And then he starts talking about the difficulty of reflecting on some of the darkest times in his life. And he talks about how effed up a man. Yes, sir, you were. And probably still are. He talks about hitting rock bottom. And I'm not suggesting, look, I'm a pastor. And at the end of the day, I do really want everybody thriving. So he ends the video with an apology, says, I'm sorry, talks about him being committed to be a better man. And he says, I'm really sorry. And so, y'all, it bothers me. I read up on Cassie because I wasn't that familiar with her, to be honest. And so I'm reading up on Cassie, and as I'm reading up on her, I'm reading some things, and I'm checking my feed because it looks like I'm blocked in. So I was hoping to be able to get some feedback from some of y'all on some of these things, but I'm buffering. So, but here's a person that was in a long-term relationship, I think from 2007 to 2018. Look, that's a whole nother conversation. That's a whole nother conversation. Like, if you and I are, look, sis, if you're in a relationship with a man for 10 years, 11 years, 12 years, he can't marry you, that's not a relationship you need to be in. And so she files, a lawsuit way after the fact, and she alleges a 10-year long, did you hear this? A decade-long cycle of abuse, a decade-long cycle of violence, a decade-long cycle of sex trafficking. This is craziness. Decade-long of sex trafficking. And, 10 years in a relationship, and this is what somebody has to endure. And so she filed the lawsuit, and then, of course, they settled. Of course, Diddy claimed none of it ever happened. And now here comes the video release 8 years later, showing that clearly it happened. And so, this really raises flags for us. And I want to just encourage people that might be in this situation to just get out, that there are resources available. Matter of fact, I'll post some things after I'm off the show on Facebook with some resources that can help you. And I want to encourage brothers. Bruh, man, if you got to put your hands on somebody, put your hands on another man. Why you gonna put your hands on a woman? Speaking of hands on a man, did y'all see that video with the brother whose daughter, I think she was like 7 years old, was being bullied by another classmate or something, or someone else in the school? So the dad goes to the school, writes letters, talks to the family, all of that. And like, his daughter kept coming home bullied, and Dad was like, you know what? He gets his friends, I think it might have been his brothers, and literally he does a video talking about how they put hands on the father. It was like, you know what? You bullying my daughter. You have your daughter's bullying my daughter. I tell you what, I'm put hands on you. Now, listen, let me tell you something. I'm not an advocate of violence in any sense at all. People do some wild stuff over their children, and people will do some things they didn't even expect doing. If you out there, what do you think about that? Like, I feel like as parents, we are responsible for our children who are in our home. And I think, there needs to be, harsher laws even. That, when your child is out there, doing dumb and doing the most, and they're your child and they live in your home, there ought to be a level of responsibility that the parents have to will for that. And I know the child has free nature and all that, but oftentimes it's a byproduct of what they're getting in their homes, byproduct of what they're seeing in their homes. And I do find myself, though, praying for that child, because I'm wondering, well, that child's going to school bullying somebody, or are they out there, are they being bullied inside their home? And so we're living in some wild times, y'all. We're living in some really wild times. And I just, again, I just want to encourage you to get all the help you can get. When I come back, I want to jump in. I talked a little bit about Diddy. I talked a little bit about people that tell a lie like it's the truth, and particularly these conservative talk show personalities that are just over the top with their lies, and a little bit about the brother who, as a matter of fact, the video, the guy says, I'm out here doing the work of the Lord. And I was like, there you go, having to put the Lord in it. So anyway, when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about freedom of speech. I don't know if you've been tuned into these commencement, these graduation speeches, but the kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs is all out there now on social media, all out there in the news based on some of his comments. And then when we move from that, I want to have a whole segment on free speech. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about a bill that's in the North Carolina Senate Judiciary Committee right now. And then I want to close out the show on this craziness in Congress and civil discourse between Congresswoman Crockett and Congresswoman Green. And I want to talk a little bit about this. So this is James Gilliard. You are watching and listening to the James Gilliard Show right here on Choice 92.1 FM. After we pay a couple bills, we'll be right back. Go ahead and share this with somebody.
The James Gilliard Show on Choice FM.
Pastor G, this is James Gilliard, and welcome to the James Gilliard Show. We're talking politics, religion, news, pop culture, all the things that are happening in our society. Today is Monday, May 20th. Shout out to my wife, Angela. This is her birthday today, so appreciate all of you and the love that you've been giving her. I want to shift gears a little bit. Harrison, first of all, let me just say this. I'm going to go ahead and give a free plug. I love listening to, this is something most people don't know about me. I really enjoy watching and listening to commencement speeches. Like, I love a great commencement speech. And you know me, I will also call out a bad one. I'm not going to do that again. I already put enough shade on some certain graduations, so I'm going to let that go. But I also love really great graduation speeches. And there is a professor, first of all, shout out to Clark Atlanta University, right? Now, that's saying a lot coming from a Morehouse guy, but let me just tell you real talk. The Atlanta University complex, of where I was educated, we talk, a lot about, A&T, and rightfully so, being the largest black institution of higher education in the country. But what's not talked about is the Atlanta University complex. And Atlanta University complex has, when you put the entire university system together out there, it is actually the largest campus of black students anywhere in the world. And so you've got Morehouse College, you've got Atlanta University, you've got Spelman, you've got Morris Brown, and you have Clark Atlanta. I'm a Morehouse guy, but let me tell you this. I think one of the best kept secrets in the country is Clark Atlanta University. It is an outstanding university. Let me tell you what I base that on. I base it on my interaction with the graduates. Like, there are certain schools that you just don't meet a bad graduate. And let's be honest, there are certain schools where you're like, oh, you went there, I'm not surprised. Like, I can tell. But there's some schools that you just don't, and the graduates you meet are just impressive. You know, Morehouse is one of those schools. It just is. But Clark, I'm going to tell you another school for me like that is Hampton. Hampton is like that for me. So Clark Atlanta is like that. So I want to shout them out because they didn't bring anyone from the outside. They let one of their own professors give the keynote, give the commencement address. Daniel Black, Dr. Daniel Black. You want to treat yourself to 15 good minutes? Listen to Daniel Black's commencement speech at Clark Atlanta this weekend. Notice I'm not shouting out Biden in his speech at Morehouse. I'm going to get on that in a different show. But you want to hear Dr. Daniel Black. I just finished reading his book, Black on Black. And, well, not just finished reading. I probably read it about 6 months ago. But, man, what a great speech. The opening is awesome. The close, I mean, it's just a great speech. So Daniel Black, Dr. Daniel Black, PhD, African-American history professor at Clark Atlanta, gave the commencement address. Fire. So we're on this issue of freedom of speech. Harrison Butker, or Butker, I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce his name. He gives a commencement speech last week at Benedictine College. Now, this guy is the kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs. And he is hyper conservative, and I'm not mad at you about that. But he winds up in a real social, cultural kind of speech. And it really upset the students. Not only did it upset the students, but it raised a flag for me about how we deal with free speech in America. Because here's the deal. He had the right and has the right to say everything he said. And I'm going to get into some of that. But here's my issue. The NFL is running to his defense with, hey, listen, he's a great guy, and I know he's a person of strong faith, and he has every reason to say the things he said. But when Colin Kaepernick exercised his free speech by simply taking a knee, after consulting, by the way, military personnel, because he wanted to just sit down during the national anthem. And they said, no, it would be hyper disrespectful if you sit down, but if you kneel. So he kneels. You know the Colin Kaepernick story, right? So he winds up totally banned from the NFL because of him exercising his free speech, which is crazy to me because, we're so big on people exercising free speech until their speech is something you disagree with. Like, somebody gets to flag the Confederate flag as an expression of their free speech, but I don't get to kneel down over the American flag as my free speech. So people get to have free speech except when it's about Palestine. So this issue raises a hot button for me. So let me tell you first of all what the students were saying. And so students said something like, let me find it real quick. So one student said she was shocked that Butker used the speech to address gender roles instead of encouraging her and other graduating women to follow their dreams. This is an all-female college. So here he is at an all-female college using this opportunity to speak to the graduates to encourage them in the next phases of their lives. And he's talking about gender roles. One student says, my jaw dropped at one point. Said another student, 21-year-old Susanna Lizagang, who graduated with a graphic design degree. This is what she says. It was just very uncomfortable. And I was looking back and forth at some of my friends, and we were like, this is just not the time and place for this at all. So in his speech, he talks about that the most important role for a woman is being a homemaker. I want to say that again. The most important role for a woman is being a homemaker. Now, first problem, now let me be very clear. I believe, I'm a father, so I do think there's a tremendous blessing in parenting, but what about not every woman wants to be a homemaker. Not every woman wants to be married. And not every woman wants to have children. And so I get the fact that it's a blessing to be able to do it. But at a college graduation, this is the kind of stuff you're talking about. And then he asserts, so the most important role for a woman is being a homemaker. And then he says Pride Month is an example of deadly sin. Again, this is a college graduation. This is not your conservative, evangelical, Southern Baptist, or Assemblies of God church. This is people who have toiled for 4, 5, 6 years to get a degree. And so, and you want to fight a culture war? And that's my issue. And this goes back to what I said at the top of the show. At the top of the show, we are getting dragged into emotionalism over lies because people tell them so convincing, and it's generally over culture stuff. And so you can't convince me there's not one student in that graduating class that is bisexual or transgender or lesbian. You can't convince me it's not one in that graduating class. And does that one student not have the right to be encouraged to go on to live her life in a way that is going to be most life-giving for them? This is not, listen, take your hat. This is not the preacher talking. This is the human being talking. And so what's interesting is that in the 6 days since the commencement address, Butker, he's 28 years old, nor the small Catholic school have commented publicly about the backlash. And graduates who attended the ceremony have been left to grapple with the fallout. They should not have. See, graduation shouldn't be about the commencement. It should be about the students. That's the problem with mostly all of our educational systems. The problem with most of all of our educational systems is we make them about everyone and everything but the students. And that's whether we're talking preschool, K-12, college, community college, 4-year college, private, parochial, public, charter. So much of our dialogue has to do with everybody but the student. When it comes to a graduation, that commencement should be about those students. And whoever is tasked with speaking to them should be speaking to them to encourage them to go on to live a better and a more complete life. And so here's my struggle. So the CEO's family, the CEO of the Kansas City Chiefs family weighs in. Now, first of all, multi-million-dollar stay-at-home moms, I don't even feel like get the right to even chime in on this, but that's a whole nother conversation. But they talk about how they commend his speech, and the NFL has commended his speech and said, look, we don't have to all agree with him, but he has the right to say it. My struggle with that is, but that was not what you were saying at all when it was Colin Kaepernick. And I guess what I hope will happen more than anything as you listen to my show and watch my show is that I can arm you with enough ammunition and enough resources that we can push back on some of our friends who claim to be friends but yet lack the courage to speak when speaking is necessary and lack the courage to address things that need to be addressed. I'm taking a look at all of your comments. Colin is a young man of color. Yep. Know your audience. So Cynthia, I agree. I think that's really what this comes down to. I mean, when you listen to Daniel Black's commencement address, and I hope some of you will at Clark Atlanta, you can thank me later. He knew his audience, man. He hyped up the fact. He hyped up the fact that they want Morehouse or Spelman. He was like, you know what? There's other schools around us, but they're not us. I mean, he knew his audience. And I think that begins to be the problem for me in a situation like this. Okay, it's a Catholic school, but this is not the time or the space to fight a culture war. And so sad. I missed that part. So yeah, check it out, y'all. Check it out. So, my hope is that we can have some equity and some equality. Like, I really don't mind somebody like this kicker from the Chiefs making his comments, right? They are his comments. But if you're going to make those comments, then someone else that may have some negative position towards America or whatever have the right to also make their statements. You know, I was watching a basketball game last night, and they let them play they let them go all in. And they let them, I feel like the refs called a decent game, but I oftentimes don't feel like refs call a decent game. And the only thing that I really want of a referee is I want you to call the game the same on both sides. Both sides of the court, both sides of the field. However you call it, call it. But if it's going to be a foul for one player and you call it a foul, then it's got to be that for another player. And then if you decide not to call it and it's a no call, then it's got to be a no call. And that's my issue. I think what is creating tremendous division in our country, here in North Carolina, Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, Roanoke Rapids, Wilson, Rocky Mount, Tarboro. What is creating tremendous division is that here it is. We have the same word but a different dictionary. So we use the expression free speech, but then we want to use it in a different way based upon the person's color, their gender, their ethnicity, their education. So speaking of free speech, what says you about this issue of free speech? So speaking of free speech, let's talk about our North Carolina General Assembly. Folk, you know I'm going to say it every show, voting matters. There are people, I want you to remember this, there are 10.5 million people in North Carolina. Of those 10.5 million people in North Carolina, from a general statute legislative perspective, there are 151, 100 and, what are my numbers? 120, 50, 171. 120 legislators in the state house, 50 senators, that's 170, and one governor. Those are, even though the governor's job is principally executive, he still has the power to veto or sign bills into law. So out of 10.5 million people, you have 171 people that are making decisions. That's all. That impact every area of your life and my life. So what's happening? House Bill 237 is in the General Assembly right now. This is an amended version of, there's an amended version of House Bill 237 that's in the Senate Judiciary Committee. So it's come out of the House, it's gone to the Judiciary, it's gone to the Senate. I've told you on this show before, but I want you knowledgeable, because you don't really know a thing until you can share it with someone else. You don't know a thing until you can teach it to someone else. Did you hear that? I don't know a thing until I can teach it to someone else. Sometimes I spend moments of repetition on the show because I want you to know a thing in such a way that you can teach it to somebody else. So in order for a bill to become law, it starts in one of two chambers. There are two chambers, the House and the Senate. It starts in one of those chambers, and then once it goes out of that chamber, it gets voted out, it goes to the opposite chamber. This bill started in the House. It got sent over to the Senate. Once it gets sent over to the Senate, it gets read in, and it goes through committees. Now this bill is in the Senate Judiciary Committee. It's House Bill 237. Let me tell you what this House bill is. Are you ready for this? This goes to show you how people have differences of viewing free speech. This House bill, and at first you may not connect free speech to this. This House bill will prohibit, that means make illegal. You can no longer do it. Listen to what I'm about to say. It's going to prohibit the wearing of masks in public. I can't make this stuff up, y'all. We have people that come to our church right now, post-COVID, that wear masks because they have a high propensity towards sickness, or they don't want to get contracted with COVID again. This House bill, literally, are y'all hearing me? This House bill would literally prohibit the wearing of masks in public. So let me share a little bit about the bill with you. As you can imagine, it's very controversial. This bill, which would also, now listen to this. This is how they get bills all crazy. It would also increase criminal penalties for those who commit crimes while wearing a mask in public. I'm not talking about hoodie. I'm not talking about some big old ski mask. I am talking about the kind of mask that people put on because they have COVID, or because they don't want to, the truth of the matter is, if you ever been out somewhere in public and people hacking and coughing all over the place, can you imagine people who are have immune issues? So the bill would increase criminal penalties for those who commit crimes while wearing a mask in public. And the reason they're doing it, this goes to the free speech argument. It comes in the wake of protests that have erupted on college campuses across the country in response to the Israel-Hamas conflict. So because college students are expressing, and listen, I have some very specific opinions about this conflict. But what I do believe is that people have the right to express their First Amendment right of free speech. Now, we can get into some of what protests look like. I mean, we've got to talk about some of that. But if I want to stand in front of a microphone with a mask on because of COVID, or because my system has a low immunity, you mean to tell me that if I get locked up for boycotting and I have on a mask, I'm going to face a higher penalty? Now, put all this together, people. Do you remember COVID, and who were the populations of people that were most adamant to not wear masks? Who were the populations of people most adamant that this too shall pass and this is not a big medical deal? I mean, let's be honest. And I'm going to call a spade a spade. They were white evangelical Christians. By and large, they were white conservative people. So that means they are less likely to wear a mask in public anyway. So what this bill in essence does is it creates harsher penalties for a population of people that are not white evangelicals. And this is what happens this didn't happen 10 years ago, 3 years ago, this week. So the legislation would also create a new offense for blocking traffic. It would also create a new offense because protesters are now blocking traffic as a tactic used in some of the recent protests. Here's my issue with that. If you want a bill on protest and rioting, then go ahead and create a bill on protest and rioting. But you're going to create a bill on protest and rioting, and you got to include facial masks with it? The underlying health issues or chronic illnesses. I went to a store recently that prohibited wearing masks. It's crazy. Prohibited wearing masks. Totally crazy. I agree, Ray. COVID is still here, and many immunocompromised need masks. Thank you so much. I agree. Let me tell you who was one of the sponsors of this committee. So a lot of times what happens is a bill will come out of one of the chambers, right? It'll go into the other chamber, like I told you. That committee that it goes in front of may be like, well, we don't love this bill. We're going to make a recommendation on how we change the bill. I'm not talking about an amendment. So what they'll do is they'll put up what's called a PCS. Can I educate y'all? A PCS is a proposed committee substitute. That's where they take the original bill, they bring it into another chamber. In this case, it started in the House and it goes over to the Senate. And it goes to the Judiciary Committee. The Judiciary Committee is like, you know what? We're going to totally change the language in this bill. We're going to make this a proposed committee substitute. Guess who is the sponsor of the proposed committee substitute that I'm talking about? Senator Buck Newton. Why is that important? Because he is a senator for Wilson. He's a senator for Wilson in Wayne County, Greene County. So he's saying that his proposed committee substitute is aiming to reinstate a law that existed before the COVID-19 pandemic. Duh. Well, before the COVID, how do you make this? You can't make it up. Listen to the language again, y'all. Read between the lines. He's saying it's trying to reinstate a law that existed before the COVID-19 pandemic. What's the problem with that? Where am I thinking, people? The problem with that is laws that existed before COVID-19 had to change since COVID hit. How can you act like COVID is no longer a thing? I mean, our churches are different because of COVID. Our lifestyles are different because of COVID. So to say that I'm going to take the law back to how it existed before COVID, in essence, negates the fact that COVID was as deadly as it is. So this is what he says. We're just resetting the law to what it was pre-COVID. Oh, I'm just resetting my life to what it was before COVID. I'm just reset. That is so crazy. Let me see what y'all are saying. We must educate ourselves on the entire bill. They hide so much inside their bills. Connie, you are so right. I'm in healthcare, and I wear a mask daily because COVID is still here. They're going to always try to find a way to lock up innocent people. You are right. So he's saying we're going to just reset the law to what it was pre-COVID. That's really what the purpose is now, is to deal with organizations and individuals who are intent on breaking the law and hiding their identity and using the hiding of their identity as a way to intimidate other people to get away with it. Now, understand something. When you pass a bill, you get what's called, or when you're negotiating a bill or debating a bill, there's always something that you have to keep in mind called unintended consequences. Most people that are legislators understand unintended consequences, and you have to weigh out. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the unintended consequences of this bill. So what it goes on to say is that laws dating back to the 1950s that were enacted, at least in part, as responses to groups like the KKK, prohibit wearing a mask in public in North Carolina, with exceptions. Those exceptions were expanded during the COVID-19 pandemic, and rightfully so, because we had the COVID-19 pandemic and COVID is still here. So during COVID, it expanded to people wearing masks for health reasons. Now, this is what I need you to hear. Please, are y'all hearing me? Prior to COVID, there were some exceptions, but not a lot of exceptions to mask wearing in public. COVID hits, and those exceptions, because of health reasons, were expanded. Everybody say health reasons. Everybody say health reasons. Not boycott, not protests, health reasons. Senator Buck Newton's bill would remove the health reasons. Did you hear that? It's going to remove those specific exceptions that existed during COVID. Y'all, let me give you a scenario. To Ray's comment, that fancy word that Ray gave, immunocompromised, I think it was, immunocompromised. That's an example of a provision that's there since COVID. You have an 80-year-old grandmother. She has to go to the grocery store, but she's immunocompromised and she's a little nervous about being out in public. So she puts a mask on when she leaves her house. Under this bill, she can be arrested for wearing that mask. I want this just to sink in. So as a result, you have lawmakers and advocates from a lot of organizations that are criticizing the bill. And they're trying to, listen, first of all, it's one thing to try to restrict protest activity. I have a whole another set of positions about that, because I do think people take First Amendment rights too far, and I believe in the First Amendment right? But let me give you some examples. This bill is clearly in response to the recent protests on college campuses against Israel's military campaign in Gaza. So you've got the North Carolina for the People action against it. You have people who are fighting because it's an anti-protest bill. Hey, y'all, if you're just tuning in, this is James Gilliard. I'm hitting all the stuff today on the James Gilliard Show. I'm talking about people that tell a lie like it's the truth. I hope you'll share today's show. I'm talking about P Diddy and domestic violence, and I've been talking about freedom of speech and some of these commencement speeches. And so, though he acknowledged concerns about public health, Newton said, that's Senator Buck Newton. I said his name. I want you to be able to say his name. He represents Wilson, folk. That's what happens when you don't vote. You get a Senator Buck Newton. Newton said he believes some are, quote, stoking fears. So is that what we're doing? Stoking fears about the law and exploiting COVID-era laws that allow mask wearing as an excuse to hide their identity. Let me ask you this. Ray, you're a nurse, someone else who puts their mask on. When you put your mask on to go in front of a patient, when you put your mask on because you go to church, you really want to be in the room, but there's some people coughing. When you put your mask on, when you're out in public because you don't want to catch a cold or you don't want to catch COVID, do you put your mask on because you're trying to hide your identity? I have yet to meet a human being that puts a mask on because they're trying to hide their identity. But Senator Buck Newton says that's why you put a mask on. Like, healthcare professionals should be livid over this. Livid. And so, he says, we didn't see Granny. Listen to this foolishness. We didn't see Granny. I told you, I gave the example of Grandma. We didn't see Granny getting arrested in Walmart pre-COVID. I don't think we're going to see that when we pass this law. I don't think. But here's the reality. With the bill, under the new law, Granny can be arrested. That's the question for Buck Newton. It's not about what you think, sir. Can she be? And you know and I know the answer is yes. Appreciate the shout out to my friend, Senator Sidney Batch. She's a Wake County senator, super smart. She's a social worker, an attorney, fierce fighter, and she is pushing back hard on this bill. She says that as someone who was immunocompromised, that's the same word you use, Ray, immunocompromised. For you don't know, she is a breast cancer survivor, and she had to come to the General Assembly during COVID. She was masked up, and she had to go through medical treatment. As someone immunocompromised during medical treatment, she opposes any provision that makes mask wearing more difficult for people with health concerns. This is craziness. For those of you who are keeping up, that is the proposed committee substitute, the PCS, for House Bill 237 that's in front of us in the North Carolina General Assembly. Listen, y'all, we have work to do. This is why we need to be voting. This is exactly why we need to be voting. Let me just say this last thing about it. She says, I don't think this is stoking the fears of individuals who walk through this world compromised through no fault of their own. And she's exactly right. If you're born unhealthy or you've developed some type of disease and you're unhealthy, we should not be attacking them in the General Assembly and making their life more difficult. Hey, this is James Gilliard. You are listening and watching the James Gilliard Show. I got one last break and then we'll close out today. We'll be right back.
The James Gilliard Show on Choice FM.
People, y'all, it's wide open in here today. Are y'all hearing this show today? Cynthia says, what's the question? So my brother-in-law, this is Karen's question, Karen's question. So my brother-in-law, who is on dialysis and needs a mask for protection against a lot of airborne viruses, can be arrested under this bill. Yes, ma'am. Y'all, honestly, how hard is it to keep that provision? How hard is that? You still can do everything you want to see. They do the most. They do the most. This is why you have to vote. Because they will get in office and do the most. They will do stupid. And so Senator Sidney Batch says, my issue is that we are removing, and listen to this, we are removing the specific section that gave people who are immunocompromised or people who were sick and just care about the community. Someone walking around with tuberculosis wants to wear a mask to protect everybody else. And with this bill, they're no longer able to do that. Somebody who's literally on cancer, on chemotherapy, and, they keep a mask on their face because they're compromised. And this bill would not let them do that. Senator Natasha Marcus from Mecklenburg says no one wants to see a grandmother arrested for wearing a mask. The fact, though, is that this would criminalize that process. It will criminalize mask wearing. She adds that wearing a mask in public is life or death for some people. Stated plainly, your bill will make it illegal to wear a mask. So you've got Disability Rights North Carolina, you have Emancipate North Carolina, you have the ACLU. All of them are speaking out against this bill. And the reality of it is that it's really part of a broader attack on democracy. We're starting to see within our own General Assembly that lawmakers who are supporting attacks on the right to protest are also leading efforts to make it harder to vote and to participate in the legislative process. NAACP chimed in on it. They say it's a dangerous bill that threatens the fundamental rights to protest in North Carolina, that the legislation seeks to impose severe penalties on protesters, particularly targeting those who block traffic or wear masks. See, here's my issue. Why are we having this combined conversation? Like, don't have immunocompromised people and mask wearing in a protest bill. But that's what they're doing. And that's what's going on in our General Assembly. And that's why we need to vote. I hope today's show was helpful. I hope you learned something. I hope it was informative. I hope I rattled a few feathers and got us thinking about some things. I hope you'll share this. And I hope that you'll be back with me next week. I didn't get a chance to jump in with this whole debacle with what's going on in Congress with Representative Jasmine Crockett out of Texas and Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene and this whole conversation. We're going to deal with that next week. I'm going to put a pin in this for next week, and we're going to talk about some of that dialogue and this whole beach blind, bad-built, butch body, and fake eyelash conversation. We'll be back at that next week. Hey, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. This is James Gilliard, the James Gilliard Show. I'm out of time, but I'm not out of talk. I'm out of clock, but I'm not out of content. I'll see you next Monday.